Alright friends, in the last video I shared with you my 5 top reasons why I think a minivan makes the absolute perfect camper. To travel in, to van life in, car camp on the weekends in, switch back to daily driver, you name it. Love the minivan, love my girl Tara, my Dodge Grand Caravan. She's been the perfect camper for me, especially as an intro camper. But I always want to be open, honest, and transparent. So in this video, I am going to share with you 6 reasons. 6 reasons why a minivan may not be the right fit for you when looking for your ideal camper rig. Let's get into this list, shall we? I'm Heather, and welcome back to my channel, Heather's Hikes and Adventures, where we talk all things van life, car camping, and lately about my health journey as well while I navigate through all of that. But we are talking about why a minivan may not be your ideal choice to go camping in or traveling out of. So let's get right into reason number 1. I'm going to start with probably the most obvious con of having a minivan camper, and that is that you cannot stand up in it. I am a member of the Short Girlies Club at 5'2", but I am still nowhere near able to stand fully up in here. Now that said, I can get into a standing position and be hunched over to move around for brief periods of time, so that does help. But, you wouldn't want to be like that hunched over all the time, or your back would be killing you in no time. So obviously the most, the biggest number 1 con that most people would think of when it comes to any kind of passenger vehicle really is that you can't stand up in it like you can with a high top van or a more, traditional camping rig. But, I think that goes without saying. So let's get right on into number 2 now. Well, I think a minivan is the perfect size for one person to do solo van life, solo car camping, travel all around the country in. Even 2 people, definitely doable if you like that person. If you don't like that person, probably not. But, aside from that, you kind of, when it comes to more than 1 or 2 people, you're getting into territory where it's really not sustainable as a good camping rig for, other than maybe like a quick overnight or something. Because if you're on top of each other and you don't have your own space and you don't have easy access to the things you need, and you're always crawling around over things, you're going to be stressed out and frazzled and exhausted, and you're not going to have any fun. So, I would say that that's a downside to take definitely into consideration, is if it's going to be for more than 1 or 2 people, or, a combination of a person and pets. You get what I'm saying. Just take capacity into account. This may be one of those occasions where 3 is definitely a crowd. All right, now moving on to the next item. If you're somebody who's going to be doing this, maybe longer trips, full time, wants it to be a more sustainable long-term option, you most likely are gonna be a little bummed about not having a standard kitchen or a devoted bathroom area. You just kind of have one living space that you can kind of create little rooms with. But let's face it, you're in one little small living space. So kind of hard, even if you go with a build and remove seats and have better storage. And I've seen some amazing builds. You're still going to be sacrificing something in terms of the kitchen. Like, you're not going to be able to have the appliance options you would have in a camper or RV or like a class B or C van, truck camper. You get it. But there are great alternatives. So personally, I don't see that as a drawback, because I'm pretty much always near a toilet. I have emergency backup options, and I'm able to cook. Actually, I probably cook better out of this minivan than I do on my home base, if I'm being honest, because I enjoy being out in a beautiful spot when I cook. That has not been a drawback for me. I could see, if I was going full-time, wanting more of a longer term bathroom option if I was going to be off grid for long periods of time or something like that. But again, just something to consider. So let's get into number 4. There is an obvious lack of real estate. Now, anything mobile is considered tiny living pretty much. Even a huge RV is really considered tiny living compared to an apartment or home base, unless, you know, you're going all out with like the 40-foot, you know, 18 slide outs and all that stuff. But you get where I'm going with this. For the most part, it's tiny living to some extent. But when you talk about a minivan, you're talking about really tiny living. So even if you're not a minimalist, you do have to minimize, downsize, and learn how to get by with needs and, you know, just the things that really you're going to get use out of, or that are going to bring you joy while you're in your rig. That said, no matter how ingenious a plan you come up with, no matter how handy you are, you're going to be limited with what you can do, because you only have so much real estate. You know, you only have so big a roof, so you may not be able to do the max air fan plus the solar panels that you need. Or if you do, you know, you may only be able to fit a 100-watt panel, which may not be enough to sustain your needs. So you may end up having to opt for solar panels in a full-time setup if that's your, you know, power choice, meaning that you'd have to sacrifice a roof box, a possible roof deck. You know, you're gonna have to make sacrifices, because again, there's only so much space, and more importantly, there's only so much weight that you can put on the roof of these babies. You cannot load them up or you will go right on through. So that is something you have to take into account. If you have a more traditional camping rig, that is not nearly as restrictive. So number 5, I brought up if you go the build route. I personally love having a no build. In fact, that's a whole topic for another day about my love affair with the no build. But if you are full-time and if you know you don't need your seats, a build can be a great option if you are set and keyed in on the floor plan that you know is going to work best for you. But with that being said, minivans are not designed to really become homes inside. You've got all these kind of weird curves and fabric on the roof or the ceiling. You know, you've got curves and insulation and weird bumps and handles and little cups and electronics, and there's wiring and so on and so on and so on. With like air conditioners, mini splits are becoming a lot more popular because they're small. But again, you're going to need like a full-size van, conversion van, high top, extend, you know, longer wheelbase, not a minivan or a tiny cargo van or SUV. You're just going to have to, you know that you're going to forego those types of conveniences, and that you're going to have to sacrifice when it comes to what options you can make in your build if you go the build route. Because of that, you have a lot more challenges to deal with. You can't just deal with straight angles. You're going to have to get real fancy with your cutting if you want perfect fits and, you know, to get the most storage possible and the most real estate possible. And then from a safety standpoint, you also have to keep in mind where your airbags are, because obviously you can't put a build right over top of an airbag that's not disabled, because that could be a horrible in an accident. So those are just the kind of things you have to think about. You have to know like where the wiring is. You don't want to disconnect anything that's going to light up your dash like a Christmas tree, or disable important safety features. So you definitely have to get creative when it comes to doing a build and how to lay your floor plan out. And if you go with a professional company that does that, or, you know, order a custom fit for your vehicle, it can be very, very, very pricey. So again, that's just something to keep in mind on why a minivan could potentially not be the best rig for you if you want to do a build out. And that brings us to the final and number 6 reason. One thing you just have to come to terms with is that it can limit where you can camp in more ways than one. In some places, car camping is not allowed. Normally, that's not an issue. You would run into in state and national parks or national forests, COE campgrounds, those kind of things. But in private, city, county parks, a lot of them have rules about not being able to camp or sleep in your vehicle. So then that brings up the whole need for having a tent to set up on site, things like that. So that's one aspect of how it can limit where you can camp. But the other aspect is clearance. When you compare a minivan to, say, like an SUV, the clearance in a minivan is so much lower, which is great for entering on the sides. You don't have to kind of step up or get up into the vehicle. So it's good for, you know, the joints when it comes to entering and exiting. But it definitely is not good for those rocky, bumpy, fun roads that we love to go off-roading or overlanding on. So if that's your jam, and if that's the kind of camping or wild camping that you think you're planning on doing, you may want to reconsider a minivan. Even though they have lift kits available, and even if you beef up your tires, you're still in a minivan, so you're still going to have some clearance issues. All that being said, I think you guys know where I stand on the spectrum of whether it's a pro or a con, a good choice or bad choice for your rig. I do not regret having a minivan at all. My next camping rig, once Tara decides she wants to retire, hopefully years into the future, will most likely be another minivan. So, you know, I love my minivans. Woo-woo, team minivan. But I did want to point out that it's not all sunshines and roses, and that there may be some downsides that you need to consider too before making the choice yourself. All right, so I hope I gave you some things to think about between this video and the last one. If you haven't seen the last one, go watch that next. In fact, I'll link it below. But I just wanted to give you kind of all of the pros and cons that I've come across in the years that I've been using my minivan as my camper. And I hope that you found it interesting, educational, helpful. Hopefully it helped you make a decision of your own if you are trying to decide what rig is right for you. Either way, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon on the next video. Bye for now, friends.